Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer. Today, we've got a super exciting goal. We are going to completely demystify GitHub Pages, and honestly, we're going to show you how to do it simply. Listen, if you've been learning web development, you already know that amazing feeling of finally getting your code to look absolutely perfect on your own screen. But how do you get it from your local computer out onto the actual internet so anyone can see it? Well, grab your notes, focus in, and let's figure out how to turn your local project into a live, fully functional website. Okay, let's dive into this. We literally all hit this exact same roadblock. You just built a brilliant website locally. Your HTML and CSS are totally pristine. But suddenly you realize web hosting can be seriously expensive, right? And complicated. You definitely don't want to pull out a credit card just to show off a portfolio or some weekend hobby project. What you really need is a reliable, professional, and absolutely free solution to host your code. And you guessed it, that is exactly what we are going to solve today. So first things first, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding exactly what GitHub Pages actually is, and just as importantly, what it isn't. GitHub Pages is exclusively for hosting what we call static websites. Now this just means your site is built using strictly front-end code, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's no back-end application server running behind the scenes. So if your website relies on a server-side language, like Python, Ruby, or PHP to process data before sending it over to the user, GitHub Pages won't be able to run it. We are dealing strictly with static files here. To keep everything incredibly simple and avoid totally overloading you with info, we are going to briskly break this journey down into 6 bite-sized phases. We'll cover what GitHub Pages actually is, setting up your repository, uploading your files, fixing common beginner errors, adding a custom domain, and finally, limits and best practices. Super straightforward process, so let's get right into it. Let's kick things off with Section 1. What is GitHub Pages? Basically, it's a built-in hosting feature totally free for GitHub users. And here is how that free hosting is structured. Every single user account on GitHub gets exactly one free personal site. This is your primary real estate on the internet, and it's always going to be located at a very specific URL format, your username followed by .github.io. But actually, it gets even better. While you only get one main user site, you can host an unlimited number of individual project sites that just branch right off of that main URL. Section 2, setting up your repository. Think of a repository as essentially just your project's main folder, except instead of living on your desktop, it's housed securely on the internet. Now, the setup for your main user site requires absolute precision, so follow these steps closely. First, you must name your repository exactly matching your username, followed by .github.io. And I mean exactly. It literally has to be entirely lowercase to work correctly. Second, make sure to set the repository to public, otherwise you'd actually have to pay for the Pages feature. Third, just keep that default README file checked so the repository isn't completely empty. And finally, click Create Repository. Boom, your internet folder is ready, and it didn't cost you a single dime. With the container built, we hit Section 3, uploading your website files. It's empty right now, so it's time to actually populate it with those files sitting locally on your machine. Now, what's really interesting about this is you actually have 2 options depending on your comfort level. The quick and dirty way is incredibly beginner-friendly. You literally just click Upload Files in your browser and drag and drop your project right in. This works brilliantly, well, as long as you have fewer than 100 files. But the true best practice, especially as you grow as a developer, is using a graphical interface like GitHub Desktop. This lets you clone your repos to your machine, make edits in something like VS Code, and properly track and push your changes up to the web. But regardless of whether you just dragged and dropped in your browser or used the desktop app, you absolutely have to execute something called a commit. Think of a commit as a permanent record of code changes within your Git repository. It's basically your way of telling the system, hey, these changes are final, please save my latest updates to the main branch. Because without committing, your files won't actually update your live site. Once your files are committed, you just need to pull the final publishing trigger. In your repository, you'll jump over to Settings, then click on Pages right there in the sidebar. You'll see a deployment section where you just need to select your main branch as the source and click Save. Behind the scenes, GitHub Actions immediately starts building your site. If you actually click over to your Actions tab, you'll see the deployment running. And within seconds, a beautiful green checkmark pops up to let you know your build is officially live on the internet. Moving to Section 4, fixing common beginner errors. Because listen, almost every single developer hits a wall here. It is practically a rite of passage. The first one is honestly terrifying. You just publish your site, you click your brand new link, and boom, a giant 404 page not found error just stares back at you, totally mocking your hard work. But don't panic, your code isn't broken, and GitHub definitely isn't broken. The fix is remarkably simple. You see, when a web server loads a URL without a specific file named at the very end, it's hard-coded to look for a default entry point specifically named index.html. If you named your main file something like youtube.html or mywebsite.html, the server simply can't find it. All you gotta do is rename your main homepage file to index.html, commit the change, and your 404 error will instantly vanish. Okay, so what about the second most common error? Let's say you published a secondary project repository, something like your username.github.io/project name. Notice we are in a subfolder now. You load it up, and suddenly all your images are broken placeholders, and your beautiful background color has completely vanished. This usually happens because of a mix-up between absolute and relative file paths. If your image code starts with a leading forward slash, like /images/dog.jpg, that's an absolute path. It tells the browser to look at the very root of your domain for the image. But remember, this project is in a subfolder, so it's accidentally searching the root user domain instead of your specific project repository. Simply removing that leading slash or using a // for a relative path tells the browser to look in the current directory. Tweak those paths, and your visual bugs are fixed just like that. All right, section 5, adding a custom domain. Having that github.io URL is great, but attaching a purchase domain like a .com, that makes it fully professional. To link a domain you purchased to GitHub, you need to configure your DNS records. And this brilliantly illustrates how the domain name system actually works. Think of DNS records like internet phone numbers. You go to the company where you bought your domain, and you add specific records to point your domain straight to GitHub servers. You'll add A records that point your root domain directly to GitHub's specific IP addresses, and you'll add a CNAME record that points the www version of your domain straight to your github.io username. Once you enter those records, you just take your domain name, paste it into the custom domain box in your GitHub Pages settings, and hit save. Keep in mind, DNS changes can take up to 48 hours to fully propagate across the internet, so patience is key here. And one absolutely vital final step, once it connects, do not forget to check the Enforce HTTPS box in your GitHub settings. This encrypts the data flowing to your site and earns you that crucial, secure browser lock icon. We are on the home stretch. Finally, Section 6, Limits and Best Practices. This tool is incredibly generous, but we really need to understand its boundaries. Here are the strict guardrails you need to keep in mind. You've got a maximum of 1 gigabyte of storage capacity for your repository, which honestly is plenty of code, unless your hobby is hoarding uncompressed photos of your cat. You also have a maximum of 100 gigabytes of bandwidth per month. But more importantly, this service is strictly for personal, open source, or non-commercial use. You cannot run a commercial business, process payment transactions, or host sensitive info like password databases here. Violating these bandwidth limits or commercial rules will result in a warning email, or worse, getting your site immediately shut down. But honestly, hitting that bandwidth limit is a fantastic problem to have. It means you are getting massive traffic. So I want to leave you with this final thought. You now have the power to publish code to the internet for free. But when your incredible new portfolio eventually goes viral and shatters that 100 gigabyte bandwidth limit, what's your next move for hosting going to be? Keep learning, keep building, and I'll see you in the next explainer.